The Ring of Nibelung is a total work of art on a par with works of world literature such as Homer's Iliad or Dante's Divina Commedia. With the ring, Wagner wrote a great parable, the interpretation of which I would like to explore in this video. If you want to recall the plot of the ring, you can find a YouTube video with a short story of the ring in 8 minutes. In order to interpret the ring, it is essential to keep in mind the most relevant historical and biographical events that moved Wagner at the time of its creation. As in all of Richard Wagner's operas, the ring contains his worldview and his biography. Wagner created the ring over a period of 25 years. However, it's important to emphasize that he wrote the text in his younger years. He began the writing in 1848 and completed it in 1853 in the Zurich Asylum. This period of time coincided with the revolutionary years of Europe. The entire continent was in turmoil. 30 years after the Restorative Congress of Vienna, the desire for freedom gripped broad sectors of the population. The economy was in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. Out of this developed a class of disenfranchised workers and a thin layer of the propertied classes. The bourgeoisie began to replace the nobility. In 1848, Wagner was Kapellmeister at the Saxon Court Theatre. The revolutionary turmoil spilled over into Dresden, but Saxony's king tried to nip democratic efforts in the bud. As a result, bloody street fighting broke out in Dresden on May 3, 1849. Wagner was one of the leading activists and even stored weapons in his garden. Among his closest friends was the Russian anarchist Bakunin, who lived in Dresden as Dr. Schwarz. His friendship with Bakunin left an intense mark on Wagner. While Bakunin was the prototype of a political revolutionary, Wagner saw himself as a radical artist revolutionary. He saw room for his artistic visions only if everything old was destroyed first, and that by a revolution. Wagner's personal life situation also shaped him. His extravagance and his sense of mission were phenomenal. He was constantly heavily in debt and several times had to flee places of residence to avoid prison. This fostered his hatred of the powerful, at worst Jews, whether out of envy, because they were wealthy, or because they stood in the way of his ideas. Of course, the ring can be interpreted in many ways, but the revolution interpretation has emerged as the most purposeful. In the revolutionary interpretation, the gods represent the monarchies of the Restoration years. Threatened by revolutions, they cling desperately to power, like Wotan with corrupt laws, symbolized by Wotan's lance in which the laws are engraved. The Rhine maidens guard gold that stands for the most sacred rights of individuals, namely the right to self-determination. Just like the bourgeois parliaments, however, they are unable to resist the powerful and have to watch the goings-on powerlessly and inactively. The Nibelungs represent the common people, who are disenfranchised, enslaved by their own, like Alberich, and in the beginning of industrialization. The hammering of the anvils in the realm of the Nibelungs corresponds to the factory chimneys of the industrialists. Wotan begets illegitimate children with the commoners, who then pursue his goals without Wotan having to get his own hands dirty. The demigods symbolize the greedy bourgeoisie, which allows himself to be instrumentalized by the monarch with the prospect of power, so that he can exert his influence unnoticed. With Brünnhilde, he created an ideal woman, as he would have liked her to be. No wonder that she then becomes the companion of Siegfried, as whom Wagner saw himself. That Siegfried alias Wagner cheats on Brünnhilde with Gudrune is probably no more than a matter of course for the notorious adulterer Wagner. The giants and the Nibelung represent the nobility and the bourgeoisie, who have arranged themselves willy-nilly with the monarch. They thus become the corrupt helpers who preserve the status quo, with the aim of shamelessly enriching themselves. As the source of happiness, gold creates beauty and truth. If it's forged into a ring and thus abused, it creates domination without love. The ring represents possession and the corruption of people through possession. Power corrupts. The one who owns the ring pays with its innocence because one must renounce love for it. Fafner even becomes a monster for money. The curse of the ring affects all who possess it, and who wants to possess it, money corrupts the world. The ring represents possession and the corruption of people through possession. Love and power are two life-centered powers that are defined as opposites. He who exercises love renounces power. He who exercises power betrays love. In a formula, the possession of money and power corrupts. The pursuit of property is the core of all evil. Crime can be masked by the powerful with cunning. Laws protect the monarch rather than the powerless, and are thus the camouflage helmets of monarchs. Those who mask themselves in this way can perpetrate deeds that feign legality. The revolutionary Siegfried tries the overthrow. As a revolutionary, he becomes the quintessence of the ring. Just as Wagner as an artist had to fight against the established conventions again and again and had to fail, Siegfried fails because of the resistance of the ruling class against the new. If Siegfried was the quintessence of the opera, Götterdämmerung is the logical consequence of it. Siegfried's death is due to the raison d'etat, but the failure of the revolution already holds the seeds for the revolution, for it will come. The fall of Valhalla testifies to this. Siegfried's death was not in vain. Just as the revolutionary Wagner was sure that his time would come.